Okay, here we are, 5 in the morning here where I am at, and we're going to be playing around with some hips, legs, pelvis, rib cage, because we're still moving towards half moon. And one of the reasons why half moon has such a negative reputation is because a lot of the way that people are practicing it is without awareness of their hips and their legs and the rib cage. And so there's all sorts of very funky movement patterns which contribute to some issues, whether it's in the knees or the feet or the back or the whatever, which is why it starts to become this position that's relegated to the I must retire position, right? And that there's a whole host of yoga poses that have been labeled the must retire from the practice. And I just fundamentally don't agree with any of that, because if you have the functional components to be able to do them, then do them. And if you don't have the functional components, then why not build the functional components so that you can do them? So that's what today is really all about. We're going to be working with the platform that's the pelvis, improving that leg bone, connecting with the rib cage. We're going to stay on the floor because I really, really, really want you to have the awareness of these parts. If as you're doing this practice, you're thinking, oh my God, Susie, let's just get to half moon already. When we get to half moon, you're going to be like, ooh, I am flying. All right, so we're going to begin with a block. I'm also going to have the pelvis here handy just so you can get a feel and a sense of where it all is. So we're going to start by placing a block between the feet like this. Okay, so your feet are just like they're right opposite your sockets, but I've put this block here because I want you to roll your legs in like this. And a lot of times what people will try and do is they'll try to do this with their feet. So you can see that the feet are moving and the ankles are moving a whole lot, but there's not much happening through the hip, right? But this happens so much with folks because a lot of the cueing in the practice of yoga is about the feet, not about the leg bone and the hip. So I want you to really focus in on moving the leg bone and the hip, and the foot follows along, right? This really gives you a sense of the kinetic chain here, right? So then what can happen is that you can start leaning back a little bit and then just kind of do this a bit more. Yeah, we're going to come right onto our backs in a moment. And then you can also just take that away totally. But the reason why I like to start with the block is because sometimes people have one leg that does more than the other. So you might think you're doing it, but you're actually doing one leg more than the other. So I start with the block just to have people get a feel of which leg is maybe a little more functional in this range than the other, or which one just has a bit more coordination. Okay, so you can leave it like this. You can place your block here, but where I ultimately want you to come down to, and I'm going to just stay here so you can see my face, is you're going to do this, right? You're going to ultimately be down on the floor like that. Okay. And like I said, you can also place the block here if you want, just like so. And the idea is that you're just moving the leg bones in the pelvis. So I'm just going to come up for a moment. You're just moving the leg bones in the pelvis. And there's nothing in your back happening, right? There's no lower back issue. There's no SI joint issues. So if there are, that's sort of interesting, right? When you think about what we're trying to do is just a rotation of the leg bones in the pelvis. So it's curious information. So I would stop if you're getting increased strain or pain back there. Okay. Good? All right, let that go. Now, let's come down onto our backs. Okay. So now here, we're going to do a familiar one where you're going to take the leg up and place the foot on the knee. So the leg bone's coming up into flexion. The articulating joint here is my left hip right now. So my pelvis is staying totally quiet. It's not doing that, right? So again, the important thing, that the message in this video is I want you to notice what you notice. Granted, I want you to keep your pelvis quiet, but I also don't want you to like it down hard in order to do it, because then we're completely missing the point, right? Completely. So it's like, just notice what you do And if you can't do the movement without your pelvis doing it, then come over here into legs up the wall and then just do the movement here and really practice that movement of that range of that leg bone in your pelvis. Like really practice that so your pelvis is staying quiet. All of up through here is staying quiet. Okay? That's what's really vital, right? So just because you can't do this doesn't mean you'll never be able to do it. That's number one. And don't try and brace and compensate in order to make it happen. Okay, so here you are, and we're just going to rock one way and then the other. Now, if you've been following me for a little bit here, I do this one a fair amount, right? This is one of the ones that shows up in many of my videos because there's a level of complexity that is easily learnable, right? So here, I've taught you about articulating joint. Like this is the primary articulating joint. The foot and the knee are basically going along for the ride, right? I rotate, the knee and the foot are basically going along for the ride. So once you've gotten that, now we can start to take ourselves into a twist, a little more complicated. And because we're going into a rotation here, then I want the front of your hips, to be soft. So often as we move with gravity, when we don't have the control between the pelvis and the ribs, or we want to grip up through the shoulders and the jaw, the front of your hip will then start to clench, right? And one of the reasons it's clenching is it's helping slow the movement down toward the floor, right? Because the area in through here is not being responsive. This is one reason, is not being responsive in helping to control that movement. So because you have an area that's not being responsive, then other areas say, hey, I'm going to help out and kick in, right? And so what I want you to notice is just the movement one side to the other, and notice at what point the front of your hips want to kick in. So it's not about going all the way to the ground, although you will at some point, right? It's just going in the range where the front of those hips are quiet. And those of you who've had SI issues or back issues, you're going to notice a strong correlation between your ability to do this with your hip flexor. I mean, you may even feel this. It might not even be in your hip flexor, so I could be speaking a lie there. It might be that you use your jaw or your shoulders or your neck to control the movement down. So the front of your hip might be totally soft as you take this movement in, but it's your jaw that's like holding you. So that your jaw has nothing to do with controlling your movement down to the floor. Yeah. So this is really vital. This is really, really vital in the sense that if you can really get a feel for this in your body, like if you can feel, okay, this is the pelvis, these are the legs, this is the rib cage, here's the space between my pelvis and my rib cage, and then just notice how these pieces move. Notice what, maybe you want to push your heel into the ground. Maybe you want to do something with your elbows or your arms. Yeah, just notice. Enjoy the power of noticing, of being attentive. Yeah. And then watch what you do after that and just be like, I'm just going to push through it anyway, or just, I mean, whatever. Just notice yourself. Like, I think that's what I find so cool is we get to meet ourselves so much in what we typically do. Okay. All right. So now let's move into this side. I received a number of comments yesterday about my, about how I was saying listening to your whispers is like a love letter to yourself. And, you know, I was reading something the other day about how we treat our phones better than we treat ourselves, right? And how we see that the battery power is getting low on the phone, so we charge it up, and many of us have lots of different charging. You might have a charger in one room and charger in your office or a charger in your car. So you always have the ability to charge your phone, right? When you see that the battery power is getting low. And the comment that I was reading is how we don't do that with ourselves. But here's the thing. The thing is that we don't have like a yellow light per se that's on that's on our smartphone or that's on the dashboard of our car. What we have is the amazing capability of running down, getting tired, and then finding another way of doing the same activity. So we have ways of compensating hormonally. We have ways of compensating physically. We have ways of compensating mentally. in order to get the job done. It's one of the most amazing things about being a human being. And so I think sometimes we can get a little hard on ourselves around, I didn't recover, or I should be taking better care of myself. When the fact is in a way you are, right? Like, you're finding and being adaptable in order to get the job done. This love letter stuff that I'm talking about, this just is teaching you to pay attention to the language of the whispers, so you can start to recognize the yellow lights for what they are. But it's not to take away from the absolute sheer beauty of our ability to compensate in order to get something done. I know that sounds really weird, I'm sure. There's nothing wrong with compensating. Is it serving you? And there are times when, yes, absolutely, it's serving you. And there becomes a time when it doesn't. But the trouble is that people don't then have the language or the understanding of how to then stop it, right? And so this is really that process. Okay, so now we're going to take the leg up into flexion here, and you're going to put your hand on your knee, and you're going to press that leg in. Now, if you're at the wall, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to come away from the wall, and you're going to do the same thing here, right? If you need some more support there, yeah? Okay, so I'm just going to stay here. So the hand's on the knee, and then that knee is pressing into the hand. Now this is hip flexion. So the front of the hip will engage. But you'll notice, like, other than taking the foot off the wall, like I had to do some hip flexion to do that. But now the movement's this, but I'm holding my hand to prevent that movement. So this is essentially an isometric contraction at this point. But we don't want to flatten the back. See how my back starts to flatten? We don't want to flatten the back. We just want to leave the back exactly where it is, and we're just moving our leg into hip flexion. Yeah. And then press. No bracing, no holding, no gripping. Just be aware of your leg and your pelvis. Yeah. Leg, pelvis. Good. Okay, now from here, we're going to take this leg over here. This is another one I've done a few times. Over, and then we're going to follow the second one over. The pelvis is going to come around, so that then the aim is that these knees are on top of each other. Now, what I want you to get is, a lot of you are probably going to end up about here. See how there's a gap between the knees? But the reason for that is because the pelvis isn't coming right around. Now, you might be quite limited. As you come around here, as you come through here, and then you're bringing the pelvis around, you might get to here and be like, there's no more room. Like, I can't go further because there's limitation of tension, or there's a feel of tissue tightness. It's just that you're blocked, and that's okay. That's where you stop, okay? And then you come back. The aim is that your shoulder girdle is on the floor. And it's really pay attention to the pelvis. Think about half moon. It's the pelvis placement on the legs and how the pelvis moves around the legs. That's what's really key. So even though this is not an exact movement, that's half moon, what it's doing, the intent behind my using it, is to have you become aware of your pelvis, your legs, and your ribs. So you're really, really clued in to where and how everything is moving. Okay? Now, if you want, you can move your neck and your head the opposite direction of your pelvis. Okay, perfect. Good. And then bring yourself back. Scoot yourself back on the floor a little bit. Okay, now we're going to go into some butterfly. So here, you're going to move those legs into rotation and then bring the legs back. This is not Baddha Konasana, where you take the legs and bring your feet together and bring them down. Watch my foot. All my foot's doing is it's following the leg bone in the hip socket. That's it. Okay, so again, you can take the hand in the front of the hip, and if you can, only go as far as you don't need to use the front of your hip. Now, for some of you, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, this is seriously, Susie? This is only as far as I go. And it's like, okay, that's as far as you go. No biggie. It doesn't mean that you can't go for a walk. It doesn't mean you can't squat down. It doesn't mean you can't do all the other stuff you want to do. It just, this is where your range is. This is what's so powerful about awareness, right? Because now you're getting clear on what's working and what's not working, or just really where your movement's at, right? So rather than baking on top of it, like what might look like good movement because you're bracing and you're gripping and you're holding your breath and you're pushing through, just acknowledge what is. Like, I can't tell you how much faster people progress when they acknowledge what is. And the emails and the direct messages that I've been getting since running these Facebook Lives have been overwhelming, honestly, about how many people are telling me how much better their body is moving. Like, who knew? I'm just talking into my iPad. It's great. Like, of course, I know that what I do works, but it's great that I can help you recognize the reality of what your movement is, and then have you notice what you're thinking about that movement and whatever judgments you have about it, right? Because that's what sometimes happens. And then knowing that all of it is okay. And then just work within the range that you have, and then watch that range grow. Yeah? So I'm like more than tickled pink that so many comments that I get from people. Like, it's just so great. So keep them coming. Okay, good. All right, let's roll on over and come up into a lunge. All right, so come on over. And one foot comes forward. Okay, and then we're going to bring this leg and into here. So this pelvis is staying level as we come forward. Yeah, articulating joint, hips and knees. Of course, a little bit of the ankle, but really this, we're not kind of breaking through here. We're also not tucking. I just want you to feel the relationship to here and to here. My aim is not to give you a big stretch. I know that there are people out there who will say, tuck, now move forward and get a really big stretch in through the front of your hip. That's not my interest here. So if that's what you want to do, go for it, but that's not why I'm running this movement. The reason why I'm offering this movement is because I want you to be aware of your leg, your pelvis, and your rib cage and the space between. And can you feel the responsiveness between these two, pelvis and ribs? Can you feel the responsiveness as you shift your weight forward and back? Because think about what happens in half moon. We're going to be moving into half moon. We're going to need to be able to be responsive between our parts to notice and have a sense and a clue as to where these parts are in space. Yeah? And so that's when we can adjust easily and not have to brace. And again, it's a big reason why half moon is on the list for a lot of people as poses you should never do in yoga, which is a little ridiculous, honestly. I get it, but it tells me a lot more about how someone's functioning. If they need to retire a pose, that tells me more about what their underlying coordinating patterns are, which tells me that they need some more foundational work. Yeah, typically. Very, 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 very good. Okay. So that is where we're going to complete there. We're going to grab a block, have a seat, come into a kneeling position or in a cross-legged. It's totally up to you. So you can be in hero, virasana, or you can be in, you can have a higher block as well if you want, or in a cross-legged position, whatever makes sense for you. And I want you now just to feel yourself here and just notice what it is that you notice. Yeah? Now, it's not surprising for some people that they then begin to feel some breath in areas of their body that they didn't notice it before. So we have our diaphragm, and then we have our pelvic floor, and that's the top and the bottom of the canister. So they're meant to move with our inhale and our exhale, and the ribs obviously are meant to move with the inhale and the exhale. But when we have quite a bit of tension, whether it's around the ribs or the shoulders or around the pelvis, then that can limit the movement of our body and bringing air in as breath. So sometimes when we do some really lovely movement that helps us reduce some compensatory patterning, and we can settle more into our system, all of a sudden something just kind of goes, ooh. And then areas that maybe weren't responsive to breathing, all of a sudden now are moving with inhale and exhale, right? That's not at all surprising when that happens, right? It's awesome, but it's not surprising. So something I want you to pay attention to during your day-to-day is if you notice when that starts to get constricted again. Because if you have a tendency toward that, then we've just created a new pattern, right? You've created that. And it's a new one. It doesn't have legs yet. And so you could just kind of burn up your energy today doing what you do and then come back tomorrow and we'll do it again. That works, especially if you're in a real spot today, when you find that you just kind of like your head's full and there's stuff to do and there's just a lot going on. If you can have the space just to pay attention to when you start to constrict, stop, pause, do a movement, or do a cup of tea, or do a walking outside, grabbing some fresh air or something. See if you can do something to then kind of go, oh, okay, hold on, let's bring back that new pattern that I felt this morning. If you can do that, then that new pattern will start to grow some legs. And even if it's like you got kids underfoot and you got working from home and all that other stuff that is absolutely putting strain and load on you, just see if you can notice when that constriction happens. Take a breath. And that constriction might happen as soon as you walk out the door and move into eating breakfast. I get it. And see if you can feel it. See if you can feel that. Yeah? If you need more suggestions for that, just direct message me or email me. I can come up with some more ideas for you. Good. Okay. You can be here for as long as you'd like, sitting and breathing. Lie on your back, have a shavasana, sitting and breathing. Maybe you want to get out for a run, or you're going to go to sleep, or whatever it is. Whatever the next transition is for where you're going to go next, just take a few breaths. Be conscious as you then take the next steps towards whatever you are doing next. You have a great, great day. We will see you tomorrow morning. Take care.